to take it to this fucking level where you make up so much fucking bullshit just because you don't want to get fucking arrested, you don't want to go to jail.
Nobody should die for stupid shit like that.
Yep.
Jeff, we're back for another episode of Lawish. Welcome back to Lawish. This episode is not sponsored by Ball aluminum cups, but they're legit.
They are
Like
legit.
them. We put them in the freezer.
No kickback, but they're
Put in a little
pretty solid.
something and drink away. Kids, this is soda.
Use discount code not sponsored by Lawish
for no discounts.
for 0% off.
Welcome back to Lawish. Today we have another update in the Mar-a-Lago saga.
Yeah.
And this one, so, by the time you watch this, we've had a couple of episodes that we talked about Mar-a-Lago from the beginning. We had an update. This is the second update. In between, we talked about something else because things are happening everywhere.
Yeah.
But this happened relatively recently, is very, very relevant. So, Jeff, why don't you tell our audience what we're talking about today?
All right. So, Donald Trump's attorneys, on behalf of Donald Trump, filed a motion with the court asking the judge to prevent the Justice Department from reviewing documents that were recovered at Mar-a-Lago approximately 2 weeks ago. It's a very timely motion.
Well, by the time you're watching this video, it's probably more like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But yes.
So 2 weeks after they recovered the documents, Trump's team, Sean Hannity, the genius he is, no, his legal team, was like, you know what? Maybe we should try to file a motion where the FBI, that's been in custody of these documents now for weeks, isn't allowed to view those documents that they very likely have already viewed.
So imagine, just for context, imagine that you're standing on the street
Yeah.
on a regular Monday, and you have your phone out. You're watching an episode of Lawish,
That's right.
and then someone walks by, snatches your phone from you, and it runs away. Then imagine that 2 weeks go by, and you're like, "Hey, they took my phone. Don't take my phone." That's the speed, the expediency at which this complaint was submitted. Where 2 weeks after the fact, they're like, "Oh, maybe we should object to that."
Maybe we should have done
The difference, though, is in this hypothetical that I presented, someone snatching your phone is a crime. In this case, the FBI had a warrant, and it was within the letter of the law. So, But that is just to give context as to how big of a window we had between the time when the search was conducted and when they're like, "Hey, maybe we should object about this."
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, kind of the reality situation is, even if the judge were to grant this, what impact is it really going to have? I mean, to whatever extent they haven't viewed documents, I'm sure they probably have viewed all of them by now. I guess to pretend they didn't see them.
You have to forget that you saw them, bro.
Yeah, they just act like they never saw them, I guess. But he filed this motion asking for what's called a special master to be appointed, which is essentially some third party that's not the Department of Justice. It's obviously not Trump or any of his attorneys that reviews these materials looking for privileged information. Anything that would be considered privileged would then, be prevented from being seen by the FBI, hypothetically. There's a big issue with this, and one is the law that they're investigating. One of the laws is the Public Records Act. And by law, outside of the Public Records Act, but by law, the documents that were recovered are property of the government.
Right. So he's asking the judge, "Hey, tell the government
Yeah.
to not read the documents that they have in their possession that belong to them."
Yeah.
Because of privilege.
These are also documents that he said did not exist, that were planted by the government if they did exist, that are somehow also privileged.
If they were planted by the government, they already read them before they planted them.
And lastly, they were declassified, which means they would already be open to the public. So how are they protected by privilege if they're declassified? Anyway, none of this makes any sense, but here we are.
This is a house, but also it's a car, but also we would like to preserve the right for it to fly like a plane.
Yeah, so I don't really know where we're at in this situation, but that's what he's trying to do. Okay. He's trying to get as much of these documents basically blocked by a judge from the purview of the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Why is that?
Why is that?
Yeah. What do you think? Because obviously it's speculation. Why do you think he wants to keep the government from reading the government's own documents?
Well, if I'm Trump, it's because it's a political witch hunt. I didn't do anything wrong. And I don't want, for whatever reason.
Also, if you find something that I did wrong,
exactly,
you shouldn't have found it because I told you not to read
because it goes back to what he said when he was in office. Why would you plead the fifth if you have nothing to hide? Which, as an attorney, you know there's a million reasons why you would plead the fifth when you might very well be innocent. But that was always his stance. And the same thing kind of applies here, though, even to another level. It's like, what are you worried about people finding? What are you worried about the FBI finding if there's nothing there? And so at the end of the day, clearly they're concerned about something. They're fighting this tooth and nail. And even if we're just like, let's get it out there. We want everybody to see there's nothing here. Why are you blocking the government from seeing these documents, right?
Yeah.
But that's also a big push. He's been publicly trying to say, oh, do this or that. We need transparency. This was a sham. This was a raid. But at no point did Trump argue that the affidavit should be released. Not the search warrant. The affidavit, which actually says what evidence was relied on to get the search warrant. You would think he would want that released. All the other people in the government want that released. The other Republicans are advocating the release. Trump's legal team, notably, and it's actually touched on in the letter from the archives, National Archives, never once requested that. And the question is why? Why not? If you're trying to push for the search warrant to get out, everything else to get out, why are you worried about the affidavit getting out if there's nothing there, right? And there's full transparency if this was based on a whole sham. So there's a lot of speculation. Who the hell knows? But at the end of the day, he's trying to get the judge to prevent the government from seeing as much potential documents as they can by saying that a lot of it's privilege. And he did this by reaching out to the National Archives. He had told them, hey, we need more time to look through the documents to see what's privileged and what's not. They gave him 4 weeks. And at this point, throughout this process, he asked for more time. At the 4-week mark, they were like, okay, how much more time do you need? And he was like, well, he basically said, like, well, we don't know.
Forever.
But yeah, and he was like, but also, if you don't grant this, then we will just go ahead and say everything's privileged. Okay. And so at this point, the person working from the archives was like, we can't just keep giving you more time, right? Like, these documents are supposed to be turned over to the FBI. They're requesting the FBI is requesting to view these because of all these reasons, the ongoing investigation. And the irony of this whole thing is his legal team, in their motion to the court, Trump had repeatedly said himself, why would the FBI raid this innocent person who's been cooperating this whole time? Well, there's a lot of issues here, right? We have not only, you obviously clearly not turn over all the documents because we now have 15 boxes of material that was recovered.
Well, 11 after that. So
yeah.
15 and plus 11.
Yeah, so almost 30 boxes of shit, and 300 of which at least were like highly classified or classified.
300 of which?
Yeah.
Oh, 300
no, 300 documents.
Oh, I
yeah.
thought it was like 300
Not
boxes.
yeah.
Okay.
But so those weren't turned over, right? So I wouldn't call that cooperating. But moreover, he's fighting throughout this entire process from the FBI seeing the documents that were initially recovered through this, saying all this other stuff and keeps delaying it. That doesn't sound like you're cooperating either. And then we find out he had documents in his freaking closet stored away.
What?
Hidden in a closet. That were not...
Aside from the other 26
yes,
boxes?
shoved in a closet. Confidential documents are shoved in his closet.
I didn't know that. Is his closet plated in gold, though? Because maybe they were declassified by virtue of being next to this, in this golden closet.
Maybe they were. But there's, common sense would tell you, from the FBI standpoint, doing this investigation, maybe he's trying to hide something. Maybe at very least he's withholding information. And we know that he is, now that we found through the raid, they recovered all those documents. But it's like they had reason to believe there was a lot more there than what he was coming forward with.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, he was being misleading. So this whole notion, and they argue in their, their motion, which I want to read some of it because I think it's funny, but they argue that, he'd been cooperating the entire time. This is a political witch hunt. They just did this for optics. They didn't need to do this. He would have gave them whatever they were asking for. Well, when the hell was he going to do that? Because he surely hasn't been doing that, right? He said everything had been turned over.
In anywhere in the motion, are they arguing that the search was in violation of the Fourth Amendment?
Yeah.
Or that it was
in
some other way illegal?
They argue it was a violation of the Fourth Amendment, but they mainly rely on, they try to argue it's overly broad.
Okay.
And so I'll touch on some of those.
But they were looking just for documents that belong to
which could
the
literally
archive,
be anywhere.
Which is, were they brought in the scope or brought in the geographical?
They're trying to argue both. They're
Okay.
saying like it was too broad as far as like what they were looking for, and then also where they were allowed to look for this.
But the thing is that they don't know what they're looking for because they don't know what he took,
Exactly.
right? And then as far as where do you hide this stuff? It could be anywhere in
You
your
literally
property.
could put-
yeah,
and that's
put
what
it on
the search
hole
warrant essentially said.
11 of your
Yeah.
golf course.
It was like anywhere that documents could be stored, right?
Yeah.
Because you could shove documents in your closet. Like we know there were some.
Microwave.
You could put them anywhere. Your shoe. Who the hell knows? But I want to read some of this. I thought it was just interesting, if nothing else. This was the actual filing with the court that kind of led to all this. It says on August 8th, 2022, in a shockingly aggressive move, and with no understanding of the distress that it would cause most Americans, roughly 24 special agents of the FBI, directed by attorneys of the U.S. Department of Justice, in quotes, the government, raided the home of President Donald J. Trump. Okay, so Garland apparently had thought this over for at least a week after having very serious concerns. Even with the January 6th committee pushing him that you need to investigate Trump, you need to do something, he didn't for over a month, if not more. This wasn't a rushed decision. So the whole thing that they have no understanding of the stress that this would cause people, they absolutely knew the impact this was going to have politically and throughout the nation. He very much, I think, was reserved. But, go on saying that they took the passports. And they were arguing that it was just overly, it was a legal search. It was overly broad. Well, the passports were also the property of the government. At least one of the passports, one of them was expired. The other one was one that is given to presidents while they're in office to be able to travel overseas on behalf of the United States. This is government property. This is Donald Trump's personal take home with you. It was like a diplomatic foreign passport. It wasn't something for
It's
him
not
to,
your blue book that you have
Yeah.
at home. Every one of us has one.
Exactly. So that was 100% part of this. And then there might have also been a concern, which I think is ridiculous if they did, but potentially if you were going to, with this flight risk or something, the government always can confiscate your passports in the process of an ongoing investigation. I don't think that was a concern, though. I think one of them for sure was the government. The other one was already expired. It was also probably in these boxes of, documents that they just grabbed because there were so many of them. But yeah, he goes on and says, why raid my home with a platoon of federal agents when I have voluntarily cooperated with every request? Well, we already talked about the reasons he clearly wasn't cooperating, at least to what the FBI found to be sufficiently cooperating. He said everything was turned over. We know that wasn't true. There was hidden documents outside of the area that he said everything was being stored at. That's obviously problematic. There was continual delays with the National Archives. I don't say much of this was cooperating. He did, at some point, allow the FBI to come into the storage room to see some of the documents. He put an additional lock on there, which we also spoke about in the January 6th, on the recommendation of the FBI to keep it more secure. But he certainly wasn't fully cooperating. Mm-hmm. He said that, the government had refused to provide Trump with any reason for the unprecedented general search of his home. Again, who had been
The reason is no other president has
cooperating.
taken boxes from the White House before. So it is unprecedented because nobody has done it before.
And they said he didn't give him a reason. Look, when somebody raids you, the government raids your house or whatever they're raiding, you get the search warrant. That's all you get. They don't say, hey, here's what we're investigating you for. Just so you know, here's a heads up. Here's what we're going to be diving into. So if you want to destroy any evidence that might link you to this crime, go ahead and do so. Like, they don't do that. They don't give you a heads up as far as what they're doing. The search warrant explains what you're legally entitled to. That was given to one of the lawyers that was there.
Sean Hannity.
But then he says, President Trump determined that a search for documents bearing classification markings should be conducted even if the marked documents had been declassified. So this was after the FBI or the National Archives had reached out to the Department of Justice and said, hey, we're missing a bunch of stuff. They reached out to Trump, and he was like, they're like, hey, well, do you have any documents basically we're missing all the stuff? And he's like, oh, and he tells his team, hey, yeah, guys, you should look, see if there's anything there supposedly. Of course, they added in that even if they were declassified, because now that's what their argument is now, right? I doubt at the time he was like, hey, guys, all this stuff's declassified, but just find some documents. They're wanting them. But it's like now they're like, well, even if they were declassified, he understood there was a need for you guys to get those back.
I think he was arguing at one point in time that they were more secure at Mar-a-Lago.
And his son was just on there. With Don Jr., he was on there saying, he's on the news. He was at a rally just being himself. But he was like, even if my dad did have the nuclear codes, they'd be safer in his hand. It'd be better if he had them than being with Biden, because then at least Russia and people like that would think twice before doing something. Whereas now they're like, oh, it's, fair game. Yeah. Saying that the country is safer with the nuclear codes being in an ex-president's hands, which
essentially now a civilian, a random civilian.
What is he going to do with the nuclear codes anyway?
Yeah.
He's going to run into the White House and arm it, the Pentagon? Like, I don't understand.
I mean, what you can do, which is the problem, is sell them.
Oh,
to our adversaries, or as Leviav would say, our enemies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what Leviav is?
I don't, but it sounded good, so I went with it.
Bruh.
Leviav.
Let us know in the comments below if you know who Leviav is. Leviav is the guy from the series, the Tinder Swindler.
See, I was gonna start watching.
I forget his first name.
There's just too many series.
Something Leviav. Anyway, so he could theoretically, put these codes in the hands of America's enemies.
Yeah, well, obviously that would be severely problematic, but
for sure,
with the whole cooperation thing. He said, as to why the government did not make a voluntary request to further explore the premises, given the expansive assistance that President Trump had provided to that point. They had asked him about 5 or 6 times, hey, are there more documents? We're still missing documents. He said, no, everything's been turned over.
Yeah, I got any more of them.
Yeah, it's that. It's a Dave Chappelle thing, for sure. But it's like,
what we're being so collaborative. Assistance. Why are you asking us, for more assistance?
Plus, quite honestly,
we would have given it to you. Absolutely, if you only had asked.
Yeah, you're right.
An 8th time,
And then also, like,
it's plain hard to get.
If you're at a point where you're like, all right, something criminal's going on, are you going to be like, yo, we're going to raid this drug house, but first we're going to call them and say, hey guys, you got any drugs? Just turn them over.
We just want to make sure you don't have any drugs.
Because if you do, just let us know.
You legally have to let us know if you have drugs there.
That's right.
Just in the movies.
Say that. If you're a cop, you got to tell me you are.
Exactly. Also, for our listeners, cops don't have to tell you they're cops.
This is true.
Yeah.
These are indeed facts. So, and they can also lie to you. Unfortunately,
they can.
It happens.
They can legally lie to you.
Yeah.
So just that's a little nugget of law knowledge.
But it's like, since when did you tip off people when you're going to do a raid? Like, that is literally the point in an investigation and a raid, and you have not been cooperating. So I don't know what this. But again, of course, he's been fully cooperative. He says there's no way to justify the unannounced raid. Again, hey guys, we're going to raid your place on this date at this time.
It's like, how do you
got a raid if you're going to announce it?
Guys, let's prep for this raid that is happening.
Yes. The unannounced raid of Mar-a-Lago, the home of the 45th president. Wait a minute, 45th president of the United States, quotations, who got more votes by far than any sitting president in the history of our country. Exclamation point, end quote. And
does it actually say that?
By a very large number of gun-toting FBI agents in the Department of Justice. Really gonna FBI is like, they got sticks? Like, what the fuck? What do you think? Look at this.
It does not
No,
say
it does.
that.
Who got more votes by far than any sitting president? We're gonna put that up.
God.
Yeah.
I had not read this motion, and it's just wild to me. That is something like that. You know how whenever Trump would like put a tweet,
Yeah.
you could always tell the stream of consciousness was kind of like deviating from here to there. Literally a parenthetical.
Yeah.
The best.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Dude,
it must have been
I
like
know.
he got a hold of this motion draft, and he's like, by the way, who got the most votes than any sitting president in the country?
No, I think they're actually quoting him on it. I think that's what it was.
I mean, it's got to be
But
it
it's
because
still
it
hilarious.
has quotes
yeah,
on it. So
it's freaking hilarious.
But then that doesn't that, and this is like apropos of nothing, but if you are his attorney and you are prepping this motion and you're putting this thing in quotes, are you not like almost like making fun of it because you're not taking it seriously?
Yeah, no.
Because like, oh, I'm not
I
quoting
know.
because
I know.
who said it? He said it. Like nobody else said it but him. So you're almost kind of like mocking
I
like,
know.
who got more votes than any other president in the country
in the history of
I was like,
presidents.
it could be read like that, you know. I
Yeah.
don't think that's the intent,
no,
but
these people are very much on board. But yeah, and then he says once they arrived, they requested the ability to enter the mansion in order to observe. These are his attorneys. Observe what the FBI agents were doing, which the government declined to permit. Okay, so I don't know about you, but just hypothetically, if I was at my house and the FBI kicked in the door and they're like, "Oh, FBI, we're raiding your house," I'm
on
like,
the ground.
"Hey, can my attorneys come in and watch while you're doing it?" Nobody gets to watch an FBI investigation. It's a criminal investigation. They're investigating a crime. First of all, nobody that's not part of that investigation is supposed to be in there anyway. One, because there's information that they probably don't want a bunch of other people seeing, but also because you're getting in the way. You're not going to have a bunch of freaking attorneys in there in an ongoing investigation, you know. So it's like that is standard practice. This isn't something where it's like you don't have a right to have your attorney when they're raiding you. It's like saying you're getting freaking arrested on the side of the street. You can't arrest me. Wait for my attorney to get here. You have a right to talk to an attorney at some point, but not when in the middle of the freaking investigation.
Not in the course of the arrest and the investigation.
So it's like, but they're like, and apparently one of the attorneys was actually watching part of it anyway. But
because it wasn't there like an attorney present when they actually received the warrant?
Yes. The FBI handed them the search warrant as well as the property list when they left. But I this is what made me really kind of just bothered me more I think than anything, and it's so far in this is they refer to Garland's statement, okay, that he gave publicly after all the backlash from the raid. Okay. He said this public statement is deeply troubling. Okay, given that President Trump is the clear frontrunner in the presidential primary, should he decide to run, the statement clearly suggests a decision to raid Mar-a-Lago a mere 90 days before the 2020 midterm elections involved political calculations aimed at diminishing the leading voice in the Republican Party. All facts laid out herein show that there was a complete cooperation between President Trump, his team, and the appropriate agencies. Mr. Garland's remarks stray from long-standing DOJ policy. Well, no shit. You didn't give him a choice but to respond. When you and everybody else are sitting there saying this is a political witch hunt, there was no evidence to support a search warrant, that this is all Joe Biden, you know, pulling puppet strings, having the Department of Justice investigate his opponent, he has to say something.
Yeah, when you're saying you bring the receipts.
Yes.
Well, then
and you have all this public
receipts.
pressure. You have people attacking FBI field offices because they think this is made up. What the hell was he supposed to do? You didn't give him a choice but to say something. So, yeah, it's unusual, which is why he didn't say something before. Like, you don't talk about ongoing investigations. Same reason he didn't talk about January 6th. But you didn't give him a choice. You can't now backpedal and say, oh, we're the innocent victims. You said this in the public. What the? You are the reason he was put in a corner and had no choice but to, you know, make a public statement. So,
yeah.
Anyway, it goes on and on and on. That is just like again, it's the whole, you know, he's the victim. This is a political witch hunt. He was fully cooperating. Whatever documents were recovered were, that weren't there, that were planted by the FBI, but if they were there, they were unclassified. They were unclassified, or they're not unclassified because they're privileged, but they're still unclassified. Who the hell knows what narrative is going on right now? But
also, the government should be able to see them, though.
Exactly. But
classified or declassified.
Yeah, exactly. Because if they're unclassified, technically the public could see them.
Yeah.
But they're also privileged.
Yeah.
And
don't let the government see them.
But they're not even there.
Yeah. but also you didn't get this from me.
Yeah.
That is a crazy. Very just kind of roller coaster of emotions.
So I don't want to touch too much on this, but there was a letter from the National Archives to Trump when he was trying to prevent them from basically giving the documents that were turned over to them, the initial documents, 11 boxes or whatever it was, right? From turning those over to the FBI. He had filed a bunch of motions saying there might be privileged information. He was trying to fight it on that end. They gave him like 4 weeks, what we talked about before. He asked for more time. The National Archives went to the president, Biden, and he was like, I don't know. Basically, talk to the attorney general, see what, go by their leeway, because they know way better than I do about what the laws are around this and everything else. And so...
should ask Sean Hannity.
Yeah, he should have. So they say, there's no privilege. He's not president. Executive privilege does not apply to a president who's no longer in office. Moreover, if there is a conflict of who has a right to this, it is the current executive office, especially if there's a need, an ongoing investigation, which there clearly is, and it's property of the government. It's property of the government itself. So they touch on a couple things. It says, quote, an incumbent president should not be dependent on happenstance or the whim of a prior president when he seeks access to records of past decisions that define or channel current government obligations. So there's obviously a current ongoing investigation as to whether or not a crime was committed by an ex-president, potentially what implications this might have outside of that, national security concerns, potentially January 6th, all types of other things that the president, the current president, has to be able to investigate and would not be able to do so if an ex-president who was involved potentially in crime was able to say, hey, that's privileged. You can't look at it, right? That makes zero sense. And I don't think anybody would think that makes any sense.
Right.
And then he goes on and says, it's not necessary that I decide whether there might be any circumstances in which a former president could successfully assert a claim of executive privilege to prevent an executive branch agency from having access to these records for the performance of valid executive functions. He said, the question in this case is not a close one. He said, the executive branch here is seeking access to records belonging to and in custody of the federal government itself, not only in order to investigate whether those records were handled in an unlawful manner, but also, as the National Security Division explained, to, quote, conduct an assessment of the potential damage resulting from the apparent manner in which these materials were stored and transported and take any necessary remedial steps. And they talk about Nixon v. GSA, which was really the only other time this really came up. Public records and the claim of privilege, because Nixon tried to keep all this stuff from getting out there, obviously, as well, when he was getting impeached. And they came to that same conclusion back then, that as an ex-president, you do not somehow have some sort of executive privilege over the government's property. And more importantly, if there is an ongoing investigation by the executive, they need to be able to have access to those documents to do that investigation. And that would take precedent over whatever potential privilege an ex-president would have over those documents.
It's their document.
So at the end of the day, this is a meritless claim. I mean, it's an argument to be had. It's a terrible argument. It's not going to go anywhere. There's no privileged material. And it's also, he's contradicting his own argument. You can't have privileged material that is unclassified. You can't have something that's open to the public that is also somehow protected and only you can see it. Like, what are you talking about? So he goes, when we see this all the time with Trump, whether you support him or not, I mean, at the end of the day, like, he always goes back and forth, comes up with multiple different things, explanations for things, and this is no different. This isn't great. If he wants to run for office, being investigated is not really great, although I would argue it probably riles his base up even more. Mm-hmm. So politically, I think it might benefit him, at least as his base goes. But the moderates and anybody else, outside of that, I think are going to it isn't great for that. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, is that a concern? Yes. Did Garland clearly take that into consideration when he waited to actually go into Mar-a-Lago? Yeah. But is like, yes, of course it's going to have some impact. But what's the alternative? You're like, we're 90 days from the midterm elections. Okay, what do we do? Do we wait until we're closer to the real election? Or do you say, we're just not going to prosecute him because, the election's coming up and, well, maybe if he's president, then we got to wait 4 years because he's president now. Maybe we'll prosecute him 6 years from now for this crime.
Yeah.
What is that? That's the dumbest. Like, it makes zero sense, and I don't. And again, we had talked about this previously. I think, if anything, it makes more sense to do it now when it is just the midterms, right?
As opposed to,
as opposed to where it's closer, like what happened with Hillary. And it was like the Department of Justice, like, hey, we're looking into your emails like a couple weeks before the election, right? I mean, obviously that impacted her.
Yeah.
And I will say, I don't know. I mean, even then, like, to take the other viewpoint out of it, I don't know that, yes, it should be a concern, but if they thought she did something that needed to be investigated, the FBI should have investigated her. If it just so happens it's right before the election, does it suck for her and her supporters? Yeah, but too bad, I mean, at the end of the day, and I feel no different about Trump. You broke the law. If there's reason to suggest you broke the law, and certainly it seems like there is because the Republican judge signed off on it. You want to play politics unless you're like, of course, the people like, he's not a real Republican, he's whatever. Like, at the end of the day, if you think the entire FBI is filled with nothing but Trump-hating liberals, and all the Republicans that led up to this point, and that's what, again, the January 6th committee and everything else, they were all Republicans. Everybody who signed off on everything, everybody in every branch of the government, the leader of the FBI is Republican. He was appointed by Trump. Like, what are we talking about? This isn't a political witch hunt. This is a Trump, at the end of the day, at minimum, we know for a fact, we can tell that right now without a trial, without any other investigation, took documents home that belonged to the government. That violated the Public Records Act. Doesn't matter if they're classified, declassified, privileged, whatever. They're the government's property. He took them home. He violated the law. That is a crime. At the end of the day, he's a criminal. You want to believe it or not? Trump committed a crime, all right?
You heard it here. Jeff said that Trump is a criminal. I didn't say it. I've been sitting here quiet the whole time.
Now, but to whatever extent he broke the law and what other laws he broke, that's up for discussion. But it's like, we know he took documents home. He's not denying that. Well, he was initially. He said there weren't documents, but now their documents are there, and they're government documents. That is a crime. That meets the Public Records Act. That's a violation of the Public Records Act. So that's where we're at. Now, I'm not saying she should be prosecuted if it is stupid stuff, and if it wasn't classified stuff, that's not a big deal. Then you shouldn't. It's good the government got him back. I still think they should have went in if he's not turning him over because it belongs to the government and belongs to the people.
Right.
But that should be the end of the story. Now, I don't think that's the end of the story because they've indicated when he tried to get the affidavit unsealed that they are worried about the ongoing investigation, the future of the investigation, the witnesses. You wouldn't do that if you got everything you wanted. And this was it. End of story. It was just getting these documents back. They're concerned about something, right? So, but anyway, regardless of how you feel about Trump, at the end of the day, he did violate the act, and that's where we are. I don't know. Like, so the whole witch hunt thing at the end, that's already, he committed a crime. He's being investigated for committing a crime. Like, I'm not saying it's a huge crime if it's all stupid stuff, but it's a crime, right? Like, you got all levels of crimes. Taking classified documents home.
Big crimes,
top
small
secret
crimes,
documents
tiny
home.
crimes, long crimes, short crimes.
Now we got freaking, and the reason it's pissing me off so much is you got this narrative going around, and then you have assholes raiding the FBI offices, and they're getting killed because of the stupid ass shit that's being said. So it's not, people's lives are at risk over politics.
Yeah.
And it's fucking crazy. But
so not only the people that are being attacked are at risk, but the guy that raided the FBI office in Cincinnati, he's dead.
Yeah.
So his life, he took the risk and he ended up paying with his life.
Because he believed the shit.
Yeah, and nobody should die for stupid shit like that.
Yeah. And it's, look, you can hate the Democrats, you can hate the Republicans, you can hate whatever party you want to hate. That's cool. I mean, whatever. It's fucking America. You have your own viewpoints. But to take it to this fucking level where you make up so much fucking bullshit that people become delusional and essentially radicalized to a level that's like Al Qaeda or ISIS because of your bullshit narrative you want to push, just because you don't want to get fucking arrested, you don't want to go to jail. That's a fucking issue, right? And that's how we got January 6th. That's how we got this. And it's just, I don't know. It's crazy.
Why don't we wrap this video by you telling us what do you think is the likelihood of the motion that was submitted by Trump's attorneys,
special master,
being granted by, well, the special master is a different thing, right? And we didn't talk much about the special master piece because we focused on the other arguments, but the special master, like you said in the beginning, it's kind of like, it's almost like appointing a third disinterested party.
It's happened in the past.
To review the documents. And now that this motion has been submitted to the court, and aside from the special master, which I think kind of makes sense.
I agree. Because if there are, at least from a legal standpoint, if there was like attorney-client privileged information.
Yeah, exactly.
That should be protected.
That makes sense. But from that forward and all the other passages that we read, what do you think is the likelihood, percentage-wise, that a judge will be like, granted? From 0 to 100.
To prevent the FBI from viewing the documents they already have?
Yes. That they've had for 2 weeks.
Well, I think there's a lot of problems. First of all, it's not a timely motion, right? It's like if you don't object at trial.
Well, just consider that into your calculation. What do you think? What would be the number you give it?
I'm running algorithms in my head. You know, I'm really contemplating. I'm like, well, we got this, and then we got this.
Galifianakis in that movie. Is like,
yeah, I would say it's anywhere between 0 and 0. Yeah.
Really? So you think it's like, other than maybe appointing the special master, you think it's like 0%?
I could see the special master getting appointed. Realistically, to prevent the FBI from seeing the documents, no, I think it's not going to happen. I don't think there's... I mean, if you have general counsel from the National Archives, you have constitutional law from Nixon supporting this, you have the Attorney General of the United States saying that there's no legal basis for this and it's contradictory to our standing law. I don't know.
And you have Jeff from the Lawish podcast saying,
you have me.
This is not going to fly. Like, Your Honor, just watch from, the minute 23 and forward, and this will tell you why you should not grant this motion.
Great point, great argument. That's all
what
I need.
What
to hear.
What are the judge side of the video?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
As Attorney Jeff Goyman.
They're like, they don't even hear the other side. They're like, oh, you made it such a compelling argument. We don't need to hear it. No, I really think it's none. So this isn't a like anti-Trump thing or anything like that. This is just a terrible argument. I'd see at max, like if I were doing percentages, I don't know, 5%, but I don't think there's a chance in hell they're gonna.
Very highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Well, if we've learned anything from this whole thing is that the saga seems to be far from over.
Yeah.
So as always, we will keep you guys posted in between other videos and ideas for content that we've already had. We've kind of been following the news and be like, if there's an update, we kind of give that precedent so we can give you timely updates on what's going on.
Yeah.
But we also want to make sure that you get some more benefit beyond just what you see in the news, so you can, take something out of these episodes.
Yeah.
So
I do want to say real quick, I know I'm being harsh on Trump, but I'm just obviously frustrated with the impact it's having, right? I think at the end of the day, and I'm not saying Trump's some horrible, like huge criminal or anything like that. I think Trump's his own worst enemy. I think he's so afraid to admit he did anything wrong that he does a bunch of other stuff in the process of trying to get around admitting that he did something wrong, even if it's something as innocent as taking some stupid documents home nobody cares about. That the cover up or it leads up to that denial makes the investigating body like the Department of Justice think something much more nefarious is going on and creates way more problems for him in the end of the day. So at the end of the day, this could be he just took a bunch of stupid stuff home that really has no implication. It's still against the Public Records Act. It's still a crime. But it might be something much more innocent. It doesn't seem like that based on what we're getting, but it's like he doesn't do himself any favors.
The cover-up itself just maybe even in appearance be worse than the actual crime.
I agree. Yeah, and that's, I guess, what I'm getting at. Like, the constant excuses, the conflicting stories, the explanations. it doesn't do you any favors when it comes to anybody buying into what you're telling them. And so I guess that's kind of where I'm at.
I think that's a fair point. And we've talked about this before. This channel is not a partisan channel, but both parties are, it's fair game. And in this case, we're discussing Mar-a-Lago, so it's kind of where we go. But you saying why you said what you said in this channel or in this episode, it's fair game to say you are digging your own hole.
Yeah.
And you're digging it deeper instead of just kind of cutting your own losses. You could have done that by saying, oh, shoot, yeah, I took some stuff home. Sorry, my bad. Here you go.
And I think that
if you're like, no, you shouldn't look at this thing. Yeah. Is the Streisand effect, right? It's like the more you tell people not to look here, the more people want to look here. And if I'm law enforcement, I'm like, well, what are you hiding?
Yeah.
Like I wasn't thinking you were hiding something. Now I'm thinking you're hiding something.
Or you don't turn over.
What is
15
going on?
boxes of documents. Then they're like, oh, why didn't you turn it over?
Right, exactly.
There must be something.
Or you're turning over 15, but then the other 11, you're like, well, why are you hiding on these other 11?
Exactly.
When normally they're like, okay, well, thank you, and
or
that's it.
Why do you got top secret documents shoved in your closet? It's stuff that the investigating body is not going to be like, oh, that seems normal, right? It brings in more questions, more doubt, and so. Yeah, at the end of the day, I don't know. None of us do,
Thank you again for joining us on this episode. Like you said, we'll keep you posted. Jeff, do you have any parting words?
No, I think I've already talked too much.
So. All right, well, let us know in the comments below if you think Jeff talked too much today or not. And if I was just like,
not enough.
If I was just nodding reluctantly. Or I don't remember what I said.
I know, I can't remember.
But thank you again for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Forgive any outbursts that we may have making fun of Trump. It's just like we said, it's fair game. When Democrats start doing dumb shit like this, you bet your ass we're gonna start doing the same thing for them as well.
They do plenty of dumb shit.
Yeah, right now we're just focusing on what's in front of us. But leave us your comments. Let us know what you think. This was Lodge.